Hey, Janice.
Hi, Anthony.
Today is a paralegal one. Today, we're going to answer, is it worth it to become a paralegal? So lately, I've been working with a lot of paralegals, and I'm in the process actually of launching a beta course on how to train probate paralegals. So for any prospective students or anyone who's ever wondered about what life or career as a paralegal can be like, or anyone else who's just curious, we're going to talk with Janice about her career and life as a paralegal.
Oh, I'm really excited about this topic. I got to tell you. So today, Anthony's going to interview me, and I'm going to share the following information: my story and how I got started in the paralegaling. That's a word. Requirements and costs, pay and benefits, biggest pros and biggest cons.
Cool. And, if you're watching on YouTube or iTunes, make sure you like and subscribe. So let's get started. All right. So, Janice, why don't we start with your story first? So, can you first tell us what was going on in your life right before you began your career as a paralegal?
So I didn't start in this field. I actually have a bachelor's in criminology and sociology. So I was working for a police department, a little bit different type of work. And then I could go on forever. So I'm going to just make this quick. I became a paralegal on accident. Actually, I showed up to a court hearing that I had to attend. I didn't know what to do. And I showed up so prepared that the attorney looked at me and said, "Do you want a job?" And I said, "Well, why not?" That's how I started my paralegaling career.
So how many years have you spent in a law firm setting?
So originally, let's see, this goes back about 13 years. So originally, I was working at the police department by day and in the evenings, and once a week I would go into the law office. So I did that for probably about 7 years. So it was a hybrid almost at that point.
So for those who don't know, Janice runs her own virtual paralegal business. And I'm trying to ask, have you ever had a sort of full-time 9-to-5 law firm experience?
I have not. I have not spent 9 to 5 in an office setting. This happened on accident with somebody who needed a little of extra help that didn't have the room in his office to have someone there full-time or the need. So this really evolved into this virtual world.
So how did you transition from the setup you just described, where was I think 4 days a week at the police department, with part-time and evenings paralegaling? How did you transition to this full-blown paralegal business, which is your 5-year anniversary, by the way? Congratulations.
5 years. I'm so excited. So anyway, again, happened on accident by stroke of what I thought at the time was a really negative experience. Our police department laid off half the people that worked there. I was one of them. I was initially crushed. Everybody was. And I sat there and went, now what? And I realized, you know what? I've been setting up for this for the past 6 years. And I realized as soon as I was laid off, there were so many attorneys that reached out to me and said, "Oh, good. You're not working there anymore. I need your help. I need your help. I need your help," because now I had more time. So it evolved into this. There were a lot of small solo practitioners that needed help. So I was able to start working full-time in my office for many part-time attorneys who needed the help but didn't need somebody full-time. So again, it was this evolving process into, this situation, and that was 5 years ago.
All right. Well, so you're generally seem like very happy and successful in your career. So I want to roll that back to, okay, so that's a good output or end result. But let's talk about the costs. What did it take to get there?
Okay.
So number one, paralegal requirements in general, educational and so forth. Run down those for us, please.
So it's an interesting field because in this field there are not requirements. You need to preferred graduate high school, and you can take many avenues to get to the same spot. So you can graduate high school, start at a law office as a clerk, and work your way up to learning the paralegal world. You can go to school to be a paralegal. You can.
1 second, Janice. Can you distinguish for anyone who's not familiar the difference between a clerk and maybe a legal assistant and a paralegal?
So again, this goes into that really weird area that there's not a whole lot of distinction. It's starting to come out where they're distinguishing a secretary from a legal secretary to a paralegal. It's all about substantive work. And if you're writing memos and briefs and such, you're more of the paralegal than you would be just a secretary writing the cover letter that would go on that. Does that make sense? So you can start out and you can work your way up to that. But interestingly enough, there are not requirements or a national like certification where you have to be. So for you to be a lawyer, you had to go to law school. You had to pass the bar. It was very specific for you to become a lawyer, what you had to go through. Not for a paralegal. There are just many different avenues. So me in particular, I do have a college degree. I was able to use that to become, now there's a difference between certified and certification. But I was able to use my degree and my experience to take a national test to become certified. Does that make sense? Like, I didn't go to school. I went a different route to get the acronym, almost like studying for the bar. Not as hard, I would imagine, but.
So what was there a cost involved with getting that certification?
Yep. So you figure you have to buy the books. They were about $100 a piece. You have to study. And I studied for months. And then towards the end, I actually had to take days off of working to go to the library. I went to old school. I went to the library. I had my flashcards, and you have to do that. The test itself is, I believe, $250.
Okay.
Unfortunately, if you fail, you take it again. It's another $250. But it's a test. You go to a testing center. You sit down and you take the test. Thankfully, passed on the first try with really good grade. It's the overachiever in me. But when you have seen, and this is where I like that. I wish everyone did have to have some sort of certification. And I say that because then I am now required to take CLEs. If I didn't have these acronyms, I wouldn't be required to take them. But now I am. So in order to maintain it, I have to go to classes. If you don't know what a CLE is, it's just a training classes every couple of months to bring you up to speed with the latest and greatest, and really making sure you're on the same page and doing things right, ethically is a big deal. So the CLEs, you have to do it to keep the acronyms. So hopefully that makes sense. That
number one, let me just rolling back to this certification test you took. Just to be clear, that is not required to obtain a job or start a career as a paralegal, correct?
No.
So what is the advantage of doing that? Yeah.
I feel because I didn't have a lot of law firm experience, I learned everything I could, reading and, as much hands-on as I could without being in that setting all the time. For me personally, I felt it took me to the next level. Okay. I felt it made me more marketable. People don't understand the acronyms behind my name, but I feel like they look at it and go, okay, she must have a little bit more. It feels like more. It feels like an accomplishment. So maybe I spent a few $100s, but it kicked me up a notch.
I will say that when I met you and when I found you and reached out to you to start working together, I mean, until last week, I didn't know you had any other acronyms. I reached out to you based on your, I reached out to you based on what your stated work experience was and based on the phone call we had. That was really the big deciding factor for me, at least. Right.
And, some people don't know that I even have the acronyms. I had an attorney that I go way back with that says, if you need to use them, why do you need to use them? I mean, you should just, like you said, the phone call and my history should speak for itself. So maybe that was more of a personal quest to have them, but it is really nice because some people do want to know that you are keeping up on your CLEs and you are keeping up with the latest information.
So let's move on to the benefits of a career as a paralegal.
Yes.
So I think I guess your only point of comparison is your work at the police department. So, let's go with that. Can you compare, I guess, pay and quality of life and, the type of work and how interesting it is? Can you give us a sense of how you feel paralegal stacks up in those areas?
Absolutely. So I have spent most of my career, I was actually a 911 dispatcher before I worked at the police department. So I have that little bit of a quest for adrenaline and something different. But this fits right into it because everything is so different. While you may think, oh, you know what, it's family law, it's the same all the time. It's not. So I skipped over. I'll go back to pay and quality of life, but interesting work, absolutely. It's so diverse. You can start with one thing and then 5 minutes later, you're dealing with another topic and everything, each case is different. You're dealing with people, you're dealing with, emotions depending on the case. And I do feel is very interesting. It's especially if you like it to be different, it can be fast paced. The pay is definitely significantly better because if you think about it, you're now in the legal world and not the world of municipalities. It's different. They're regulated. You can only make so much. You can only go so far. But really, I feel like with a paralegal, you could just keep going up and up. Now, pay is completely dependent on where you live and what area of law. So if I were to up and move to New York and live in New York and work full time in New York, you'd make way more money than you would here in the burbs of Pennsylvania, because I think that's how it is wherever you are, in any type of career. It depends on where you live. But I do feel that the pay, it is much better, and you can work your way into different fields. So maybe there are different fields that do pay better, where you have maybe a family law that pays a little bit less, but you can move up to an intellectual property law or something more specific, and you can make more.
What about your quality of life? I mean, to me, 911 dispatcher sounds super stressful.
Oh, yeah.
Albeit interesting.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, it was, man, we could do a whole nother podcast on my stories from those days. And it was very stressful. And it was, actually they've gone to 12-hour shifts. So can you imagine 12 hours? Yeah. 12 hours sitting in a uniform in a chair, and every other call could be somebody in a major crisis. So stress level wise, this is very different. And not many people have that comparison.
Yeah.
Not many people have that comparison, but you know what? It can be stressful because you are dealing with heated emotions. Family law, for example, everybody's upset. Everybody's mad. Even in probate, everybody's sad. Everybody's your heated emotions because you've lost somebody. So it is the quality of life. I wouldn't say that. Let me say this. I own a business, so it's different. I work on my schedule, which is amazing. But quality of life, I think, it's worth it. I mean, it's just, if you're thinking about this career, it's definitely worth it, because you can make what you want out of this. You really can. Think of all the different types of law there are.
Well, I'm going to counter that. It's worth it if you have that more of an entrepreneurial spirit, which not everyone does. Because you said it yourself, you can make what you want out of it.
Yeah.
And not everyone's personality is set to maximize what they can out of things. So,
absolutely. You know what? That's every career, though, I think.
Yeah.
But it's what you make of it. If you want to keep going and you want to keep training, I think this is a career. You'll never know everything. I will never, even if I've done family law since the beginning, I feel like I don't even know the tip of the iceberg, because it changes all the time. I mean, you have to stay up to date. You have to keep going. You have to keep educating yourself. You can't just stop.
So what are the biggest pros? So one that I've heard, for example, is that if you're thinking about going to law school, but you're not quite ready yet, being a paralegal could be a good tripwire, meaning it'll let you know, do I want to do this? Do I want to invest 3 years in the tuition of law school to do this?
I absolutely agree with you. And I've seen and heard of many paralegals that started here and then wanted to go further to get their law degree. And think of the knowledge that you would go into the classroom with, having done the paralegal work for so long. You're not walking in going, what is a motion? What is it? I mean, you have a good base. That would be a major pro. If you're not ready to go to law school and this is what you want to do now, absolutely. You're only going to learn skills that are going to help you for going to school. And I mean, I've seen people do it into their late 40s. I mean, you don't have to do it right away. You can transition at any time if you'd like.
Bringing it back to something that you mentioned earlier, I definitely see paralegals as having diverse career options. I guess you could say this about a lot of folks, but a probate paralegal, for example, could stay private and work with boutique firms, solo attorneys, or whatnot. And that's a very, very, very nice quality of living life. Or you can go big firm and have more of that brag-worthy business card, like shiny building kind of life, if that's important to you.
Yeah.
Or you could go public and be a clerk in the court, the probate courts.
Right.
And that has pensions and government benefits and things like that. Or if you want to go, what I think is the cream of the crop, kind of like the top tier jobs in the probate world, is you could go bank. I mean, everyone who wants to make big money goes to finance, right? And the banks do have trust and estates departments where Citibank or Chase or whoever is the executor or trustee of an estate. And they don't call them paralegals, they call them trust officers, but it's very similar, who run the estates in the name of Chase or Wells Fargo. And they make good money. And they get all the benefits of being part of this behemoth financial institution.
Yes. Yeah. And you hit the nail on the head. There are so many different types of law you can get into, so many different places you can work. You are not limited to one area. Even if you start out in family law, you can make the transition into estate. Like you're talking about doing a training, you can learn to do a different type of law. I mean, if you have the basic information, you can apply that. You can move up, you can move laterally. You're not stuck. I've never felt stuck in this profession. I feel like you can go up, you can go over, and you can change at any time. I feel like it is really diverse.
All right. So you're obviously a cheerleader for the paralegal career. So I'm going to test your credibility and ask you for the drawbacks, the cons of a paralegal career.
Okay. So the cons is, maybe this is just me, but when I said earlier, you don't need an education and you don't need certificates and you don't need any of that to be a paralegal, you could be on the same playing field as someone who's just out of high school, who's never taken a paralegal class, that waltzes into a job. Maybe this is just me on my soapbox, waltzes into a job and says, I'm a paralegal, because you can do that. You can.
That's got to be frustrating.
It is. And it's hard sometimes to go like, no, you're not, but you can't, because they're learning as well. But it is hard. There is no, since it's not regulated, you can just wake up and be a paralegal. Now, I can tell you personally, it was 6-7 years before I called myself a paralegal. It wasn't until I took that test that I called myself a paralegal. I was calling myself a legal assistant. That was me personally, because I didn't feel like I had enough knowledge to use that credential of, oh, no, okay, now. But the day I took the test and passed, I'm like, I am a paralegal. So I find that to be a con. Kind of on the same side of that is sometimes disbarred lawyers then become paralegals.
What? Oh yeah, I've heard of that.
So again, maybe that's me personally, that's a con, but when I'm looking at someone who maybe got in trouble, I know they're paying their pensions, whatever, and they're in trouble, so they were demoted to my job, sometimes makes it a little hard, right?
Yeah.
Where I worked really hard to get there, but then they got demoted down. Sometimes that's trouble. And then you have to understand that while you're doing all this work on the back end, you're writing the motions, you're doing all the legwork, you don't always get the credit. So you have to, right? You have to just be okay with that knowing that, man, I just handed him an amazing piece of artwork in the form of a, legal pleading, but you're not going to get the credit. And you have to be okay with that. You have to know in the back of your mind, like, oh, I did my job. So there are some cons.
All right. Good enough. I mean, I would describe the first point as a low barrier to entry.
Yes.
But because of that, I'm just going to let you know from the attorney's perspective, it does get to be really hard to identify a good paralegal from one who not so good, but looks good on paper.
Right.
So when you are a good paralegal, you are, again, from an attorney's point of view, you are in high demand when you are a legit good paralegal.
Right. But it's hard to decipher. How do you decipher? You have to kind of go. So it will be nice. They're moving that direction where at some point it'll be like a lawyer where you have to, the level playing field. Did you know that there are actually some states that allow a paralegal to represent a client in court for very specific reasons? They're starting to go, so they have better access to, now, for me personally, not my thing. I mean, Pennsylvania, you're definitely not allowed, but so I think it's an evolving profession, and it'll be interesting if we had this conversation 10 years from now, what we're going to say, but definitely worth it.
Yeah, just in terms of looking towards the future, I would argue that attorneys will be obsolete before paralegals will be. Right? Or at least most attorneys. And the remaining attorneys will be true advisors, not attorneys grinding out petitions. And until the AI can get to the point where it can draft petitions or contracts, that's a void. Paralegals will feel much less expensively than attorneys. And attorneys will only advise on the high level issues. And anyone who's not able to do that, as a lot of attorneys are not really able to do that, will have to do something else.
It'll be interesting to see where it goes. But if you're thinking about getting into the profession, I mean, I definitely suggest it, especially if you like this type of work. And I mean, like you said, research it. There's so many different types of law. It's definitely worth it.
Are you glad you had a few minutes to
my soapbox?
Evangelize for paralegals?
I am. It was just really hard, I'll have you know, to just take it down a notch and not,
That was
Keep
taking it
going.
down a notch.
It was. I could go on forever. I told you I'll be writing a book, but I could just keep going and going and going. So, but that's my takeaway. Do it. Just do it.
Okay. Well, Janice, thank you as always for sharing. Janice's story of her paralegal career is actually much more interesting than what we had time for today. So let me know if you want to hear that, and we'll definitely set aside time for a full episode just on Janice's career, and not so much focused on the pros and cons as we did today. But thank you, Janice, for taking the time and sharing. And I hope this was helpful to anyone who's considering a career in paralegal or was just curious about it. And otherwise, talk to you soon next time. And thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Bye now.